Welcome to Sound of Resistance channel. Russia is not verifying because of the sanctions in Ukraine. The Russian military is bending its back on the sanctions imposed by its Ukrainian allies in Ukraine. The Russian army cannot even find weapons to fight against Ukrainian soldiers. The Russian army's stocks of weapons at the front are about to run out. In order to eliminate the weapon problem, the Russian army is looking for a solution to eliminate the shortage of weapons stocks. Russian leader Putin is trying to keep things warm with some countries for the supply of weapons. Putin's closest friend seems to be Iran at the moment. Russia has purchased a number of kamikaze drones from Iran, and we have witnessed that it is actively using these drones in its attack on Ukrainian urban centers. Rumors about the two countries are that the Russian army is requesting new UAVs from Iran. Russia is left alone in its occupation of Ukraine. The West and NATO countries have turned their backs on Russia from the very beginning of the war. EU and NATO member states sides with Ukraine against Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Since the very beginning of the war, the Ukrainian allies have provided all support of their best self-defense against the Russian army. Undoubtedly, air defense systems are at the top of the defense aids to the Ukrainian army. The Russian army managed to neutralize most of the missile attacks it carried out on Ukraine, thanks to the air defense system sent by the EU and NATO member countries. The support provided to the Ukrainian army was not only defensive weapons aid. EU and NATO member states have sent aid packages consisting of the state-of-the-art modern weapons to the Ukrainian army so that they can take back the territory occupied by Russia. With the support provided, the Ukrainian army saved many cities from the occupation of Russian soldiers. The Ukrainian army is always one step ahead of the Russian army, thanks to the diversity and technology in its weapon inventory in the war. It came to Russia from the United Nations in a COP. The United Nations General Assembly approved the resolution on Russia's payment of compensation to Ukraine. The United Nations General Assembly on Monday passed a resolution calling for Russia to pay war reparations to Ukraine, as ambassadors met to continue their emergency special sessions on the conflict. Nearly 50 countries co-sponsored the decision to establish an international mechanism of compensation for damage, loss, and injury caused by the war between Ukraine and Russia, as well as a registry to document evidence and allegations. The General Assembly is the most representative body of the United Nations, comprising all 193 member states. In the United Nations General Assembly, 94 countries voted in favor of the resolution on Russia's payment of compensation to Ukraine, while 14 countries voted against it, while 73 countries abstained. Voting at the United Nations General Assembly took place in the morning, and the countries returned in the afternoon to announce their decisions. Ukrainian Ambassador Sergei Kyslytsya used the biblical proverb, "There is nothing new under the sun," as a motive while presenting the decision taken as a result of the voting at the United Nations General Assembly. Ukrainian Ambassador Sergei Kyslytsya insisted that Russia should be held accountable for violation of international law. 77 years ago, the Soviet Union demanded and received compensation, describing it as the moral right of a country that has suffered war and occupation, said Sergei Kyslytsya. In the continuation of the statements, the ambassador of Ukraine said, today claiming to be the successor of the 20th century tyranny, Russia is doing everything in its power not to pay the price of its own war and occupation, and not to be held accountable for the crimes it has committed, he added. Mr. Kyslytsya pointed out that Russia also supports the establishment of the United Nations Compensation Commission, which was established in 1991 following Iraq's invasion and occupation of Kuwait. The ambassador explained the losses incurred during the invasion of Russia as follows. Mr. Kyslytsya said that the Russian army used bombings targeting residential buildings and infrastructure in their attacks. Almost half of the electricity grid and public services were destroyed in the Russian army attacks on your city centers. That the Ukrainian people were subjected to mass displacement and prosecution such as murder, rape, torture, and forced deportation. He summarized the effects of the Russian war on his country, including Mr. Kyslytsya said about the proposal that was played at the United Nations General Assembly. This proposal is not just about Russia. It will work for the benefit of all who are threatened now or may be threatened later by force, he said. Russia, on the other hand, immediately objected to the outcome of the United Nations General Assembly. After the announcement of the result of the voting at the United Nations General Assembly, Russian Ambassador Vasily Nebenzia revolted. The Russian official criticized the draft. Russian Ambassador Vasily Nebenzia described the draft resolution as a classic example of a narrow group of states that do not act on the basis of international law but rather seeks to bless something illegal. Vasily Nebenzia said that the countries that support the resolution are trying to position the General Assembly as a judicial organ. The Russian ambassador stated that the resolutions taken at the United Nations General Assembly do not have a stand-alone effect on Russia. Russian ambassador Vasily Nebenzia, speaking in Russian, added the countries that vote in the United Nations General Assembly brag about their commitment to the rule of law, but at the same time disregard its appearance. Mr. Nebenzia said it would be up to a group of countries to decide how the proposed compensation mechanism would work. The United Nations will not play any role in this process because the proposed mechanism is planned to be established outside the United Nations and no one has the intention to be held accountable to the General Assembly for its activity, he continued. The Russian ambassador, in the continuation of his speech, made reproachful words to Western countries. Mr. Nebenzia spoke about the compensation, stating that he had no doubt that the fund would come from frozen Russian assets, which amounted to billions of dollars in the money accumulated in the fund. But he said that Western countries have long sought to untangle these assets, not to return these assets to their owner or spend them on aid to Ukraine, but rather to finance the ever-increasing arms supplies to Kiev and pay off its debts. The emergency special session of the General Assembly began on February 28, or a few days after the start of the war in Ukraine. The emergency session of the United Nations General Assembly is only the 11th such meeting since 1950, in line with a resolution known as Unite for Peace. Resolution 377A allows the General Assembly to address issues of international peace and security when the Security Council is unable to act by unanimity between the 5 permanent members and the countries with veto powers. China, France, the United Kingdom, the United States and Russia gives authority. The current special session was convened after the Council voted in favor of a plenary session after Russia vetoed a resolution condemning the attack on Ukraine. Everyone blames Russian leader Putin for ending Russia's occupation of Ukraine. How long Russian leader can carry this heavy burden on his shoulders continues to be a matter of curiosity by everyone. The new development on the Russian side, on the other hand, ruins Putin's dream once again. The G20 recently announced that it will condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The leaders of most of the world's economic powers are at G20 about to approve the statement strongly condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has devastated Ukraine and upset the global economy. Even China, which has so far largely refrained from condemning Russia, and India, which has bought arms from Russia, are uttering words of encouragement. US President Joe Biden and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky pressed the leader to strongly condemn Russia's nuclear threats and food embargoes. Further discussion and possible voting will take place at the upcoming summit. A draft statement by G20 leaders acknowledged differs view among G20 member states, but reflects the United Nations' condemnation of Russia's war against Ukraine. If a draft declaration by the G20 leaders is adopted in its current form, the declaration will be a powerful rebuke to the war that has killed thousands, heightened global security tension, and disrupted the world economy. This will be a particularly important step as China and India have refrained from condemning Russia's aggression in the March United Nations resolution. In the content of the draft declaration prepared by the leader, it speaks most strongly of the aggression of the Russian Federation and demands its complete and unconditional withdrawal from the territory of Ukraine. The G20 statement states that the G20 is not a forum for solving security problems and states that there are different views on the situation and the sanctions against Russia. Almost all the countries of the world seem to have come together for the end of Russia's occupation in Ukraine. Time will tell whether Russia will still be determined in this invasion of Ukraine. It is estimated that the demand of the president of Ukraine not to remain blind to Russia's unlawful attacks in the Ukraine has been answered, and that the Russian army is waiting for difficult days in Ukraine in the coming days. Thank you for watching us.